7 o'clock, you got Duke visiting NC State. And then at 9 o'clock, you've got Wake Forest visiting North Carolina. Joe, where would you like to start for tonight's Big Four festivities?
Let's start with the Wolfpack.
Okay.
And the importance of this game. And I just don't see how there's any way they could make the NCAA tournament without winning this game. This is the second time this year I felt like NC State has a must-win game.
Mm-hmm.
First one was Kansas that they lost.
Yeah, we talk about, with the NCAA tournament, we sit here and we talk about opportunities.
Correct.
More often than not. And I know your argument with the NCAA tournament, you can't lose a game and find yourself on the outside looking in. My argument tends to be, if you lose the wrong games, you're certainly putting yourself in the conversation to be grouped in with a bunch of other bubble teams and then that be used against you. But you can overcome some of those things, like a bad schedule or a bad loss, if you can get some signature wins. And that's NC State's problem right now. Based on what we've seen so far this season, they had almost had it. It would have been nice to have the Kansas game earlier this year. And then they stacked a decent wins after that against Dayton, Butler, and William and Mary. But then they lose to Pitt. I want to apologize to Pitt, by the way, because when NC State lost to Pitt, it was like, State, what are you guys doing? Now
At home. Yeah.
At home.
As
State,
a 10-point favorite.
What are you doing? Seriously.
Yeah.
I like Jeff Capel, but Pitt can't seem to get out of its own way a good chunk of time. And here's Pitt at 4-0 in the league with good wins over North Carolina. What'd they do last night, Joe?
Beat Virginia. They have those Q1 wins now. Those are going to be really important for them, and there's probably a rule of what you want to call it, the rule of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
How many teams are there really going to be? If you were NC State this year, you wanted to be in the top 5, top 6 of the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to try to beat Carolina. You needed a win over maybe a Duke or a Virginia. How many of those teams that aren't named Duke or Carolina or Virginia are really going to get in? Well, Pitt's taking one of those spots.
They're going to take one of those spots.
Let's put it this way. It is January. There's still a lot of hockey left. But Pitt is putting themselves in a position to be in the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm. NC State could have done that with a road win at Miami. Didn't happen.
Which they were leading at the half and playing really well for about 35 minutes.
Miami adjusted defensively. NC State did not counter, and the rest is history. They go down to Clemson. Clemson's always been an issue for the Wolfpack, especially on the road.
For the 800th year in a row, NC State has a better roster than Clemson, and yet somehow Brad Brownell finds a way to beat NC State with an inferior roster.
Squeezes the life out of the Wolfpack on the road every single time.
Home and away, really.
I guess home and away.
There was
that's
one
true.
Braxton Beverly 3 that was
That's true. That's true. So here we are tonight. But if you're an NC State fan, it's Duke at PNC Arena. Oh, so what you're saying is there's a chance, Joe. It's funny. I was looking at Ken Palm this morning, and I'm just like, okay, what? Kind of looking around, poking around, looking at the stats and everything else. I'm like, oh, what does Ken Palm have tonight's game? Oh, only 72-70. That's interesting. Thinky face emoji. And as a lot of people have pointed out, and I know the stat's going to come up tonight plenty on the broadcast, Wes Durham, who we'll talk to in about an hour and 15 minutes, I'm sure we'll bring it up. NC State's won, 5 out of their last 6 against Duke at PNC Arena? They don't win at Cameron, but
no,
that's not
against
happen.
Mike Krzyzewski. No.
Certainly not. But they can beat, and they have beaten Mike Krzyzewski, from roll pack to butt slaps and everything else. So there is a chance for NC State tonight.
Yeah, there's a chance. I mean, Duke's not a machine.
They're not.
But Duke still has a size advantage. Jack Clark, apparently, according to the dark webs tonight, not playing for the Wolfpack. Their stretch 4, that leaves them, even thinner than they already were.
Yeah.
I can already hear the excuses coming. Dusan Mahorsic not playing, Jack Clark not playing. Truth of the matter is, I think tonight is one of those. Can somebody pull Lakeista McCullough tonight?
Who
could do it?
Who?
Oh, come on now. You remember Lakeista McCullough?
I do not.
Yes, you do.
I do not remember.
1.595 Reynolds Coliseum.
Oh,
I hadn't
moved here yet.
Lakeista 6 threes. 24 points.
Oh, okay, hold on.
NC State beats Carolina, number 1 Carolina.
Are you saying that NC State needs the C.C. Harrison game?
Yes, that was in your wheelhouse?
That was 98. That's
98,
CC
goes to
it was in Chapel Hill, Valentine's Day, if I remember correctly.
It was the only time Herb ever beat a coach not named Matt Doherty in the Smith Center.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a huge game from C.C. Harrison. There have been others against Duke, and Gnatzer had 4 threes, 21 points. In the 2007 ACC tournament, we had Courtney Fells 4 threes, 21 points against Carolina in 07.
I don't want to go like full
How about-
Obi-Wan here, but that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Or you want to jump ahead to the Kevin Keats era? Al Freeman?
Yeah.
Remember when he had 7 threes over at the Smith Center?
Yes.
The last true hero for a day, though, against Duke. Ready? Dennis Smith. 4 threes in the game that didn't count. The dunk that didn't count. 32 points. Dennis Smith that day. With your boy Jeff Gable sitting in for Mike Krzyzewski.
That's right. There's the Krzyzewski factor of winning at Cameron Indoor. So that's NC State can beat Duke tonight. To your point, you could have one guy has the game of his life, Terquavion Smith.
I mean, let's all now turn and stare at Terquavion Smith and see what he can do today.
And see what he can do. But the problem that I have against this, but Duke under John Shire so far has been a weird mixed bag. From injuries earlier in the year where you haven't had the complete group. They're not a dynamically offensively, they're not dynamic at all. This is, for lack of a better term, an old school defensive Duke team.
There's a lot of plumbing going on with this Duke team. It's been admirable what John Shire has been able to get out of this squad without his the two players who we went into the year thinking are going to be my 2 best players.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Lively, a true 5, and Dariq Whitehead, kind of that Jason Tatum type 3 who could square up and score on just about anybody. You know, those are the 2 guys they really were counting on this year, and they just haven't been healthy enough to kind of put it all together. Now, they'll play tonight, of course, as everyone who pointed out when Duke lost at Wake Forest. Well, you do know when Lively and Whitehead will be back. Checks calendar.
They'll be back
1-4
on January 4th. No, but I think to me the key here is that Duke does one thing really, really well, right? Well, one thing I say defensively, but they limit teams from shooting the 3, and they're big. And that's going to be a big problem for NC State, which you mentioned Mahorsic earlier in this conversation. DJ Burns is a lot of fun, and he's been a bright spot so far, at least for fans.
You are hyped up, though, for the Ryan Young big boy matchup,
It's
aren't
a
you?
big boy matchup tonight. Ryan Young has put in some yeoman work minutes for the Blue Devils. And, yes, you're going to see DJ Burns and Ryan Young playing a game that you wouldn't be shocked if you found it in the Lawyers League several years removed from playing in college.
Last time we were at also, one thing I am fascinated by tonight, what kind of whistle does Shire get? Because you remember how giddy I was to see Nolan Smith, Louisville at PNC Arena. There are a few things I enjoy more than life than seeing a Carolina or a Duke player, former Duke player, coming over to PNC without grandpa or without dad around, and not realizing what life is like when you don't have that jersey on, when you don't have Coach K with you, when you don't have Roy Williams with you. So we'll see what kind of whistle Duke gets tonight.
So 9 o'clock tonight, we've got North Carolina and Wake Forest. Wake Forest, like we've talked about with NC State, has gone out there and won some games that give them the opportunity to get into the NCAA tournament discussion. That's with a win at home against Duke and this past weekend against Virginia Tech.
And they went at Wisconsin, too. So they're looking good. They're much better. They're way ahead of where they were at this point last year, even though you might look at their record and go, well, it's not quite the same.
Carolina, it's funny. Carolina is an easy conversation to have. Actually, you and I were joking about it off the air yesterday when we were catching up on
I wasn't
things
joking.
from the break. No, just from the break, we were just being facetious about this. We're being over the top. North Carolina's not hard to figure out.
No.
Their best players have to be their best players.
Yes.
If not, they're gonna find themselves like what happened against Pitt. Defensively, they're not a good team. Defensively, this is not a team that Roy Williams would be happy to see playing. But when their guys are on, well then they can roll with one of the best teams in the country. That's my only concern with the Tar Heels so far. I have not seen enough defensive consistency from them to make me truly believe that they're a national title contender. And that's what we're judging the Tar Heels on.
Based off what happened. The standard.
Even if it wasn't the standard, we're basing it off of last year and what we saw what they were capable of. But to me, Carolina really is a simple equation. If their 3 main guys, if their big 3 are on, then they're going to win basketball games. If they're not, like what happened at Pitt, where Caleb Love once again found himself in a slump, well, they allowed Pitt back in that game. Pitt took advantage. They got that win.